All right, all right, all right. We should be live by now. Welcome, everyone. Um, have a quick look at how things are working in this Webinar Geek environment. As you might have seen, there's a chat. This chat is for you guys to put in any questions. So if we are in fact live and you can hear us and see us, would be great if somebody can just give us a confirmation that we're now visible here for you guys. And then, all right, perfect. Thank you for that. We got an active chat. Good stuff. Okay, let me get into the intro. Again, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. For those who are new here, very welcome. For those who are here for another version, another session of this webinar series, also great to have you back. This is promising to be a powerful session. It's about staying competitive in paid search without needing the deepest pockets in the room, right? If you don't know me yet, my name is Sam Tielemans. I am from Producthero. I'm super excited to be hosting this live conversation with someone who's not just talking theory, but actively winning in the trenches of PPC. Joining me today is Chris Nightingale from Can Do Digital Marketing. Chris, he has worked with some of the most competitive campaigns out there, and he developed a reputation for helping brands find their edge, even when their budgets might be tight and every click counts. So today's session is all about practical, real-world tactics that you can use right now. So we're going to go over how to uncover high-intent, low-competition keywords that still exist, where to shift your strategy beyond bidding, think messaging, creatives, and landing pages, how to stay in control of your performance when platforms are pushing automation and broad match defaults. So we're keeping it tight and tactical. The talk of Chris will take us about 20 minutes. I'll try to squeeze in some questions here and there, but that leaves plenty of time for you guys to go over your questions. So what I'd like to ask you, if you have any questions in the meantime, just drop them in the chat. Whenever this session is done, I go to the chat and I'll start at the top to try and see if we can handle all these questions. So feel free to drop them in the chat as we go. This session is being recorded, so if you'll have to leave early, don't worry. You'll get the recording sent over afterwards. And Chris already confirmed to me that he's happy to share the slide deck as well. So that can also be sent over your way. And now let's just jump in. Chris, great to have you here. To kick things off, could you quickly introduce yourself and tell us a bit about the case or the mindset that inspired this War Room style session?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Yeah, thanks so much for having me on today. So yeah, I'm Chris from Can Do. I've been doing PPC for about 10-ish years now, a bit of agency side, bit of in-house side. And in the last 12 months, I've effectively been running my own company, Can Do, as you can see with the cheap wall sticker I have there in the background. I wanted to give today's session to really just help people understand how to really outsmart the competition. I've worked in some big businesses where they'll just chuck a load of money at a campaign and they'll learn things really quickly. But when you're a small company, maybe spending a tenth of what the big guys are playing, it's quite hard for the little guy to win. So I've really kind of built up a bit of a war room analogy where how do you kind of win when you probably haven't got a huge battlefield, a huge team around you? How do you win and find those little nuances? So hopefully what I'm showing today helps you guys and has a few actionable takeaways for you.
Great. That's brilliant. I think that's why you're perfect for this audience, because we at Producthero, we always trying to aim and achieve to get everyone out there in e-commerce space and give them a competitive advantage to also be active, be winning, be participating in those shopping ads, even if your budgets are small. And yeah, I'm very curious to see what you have in store for us. So if you can, please take us to your talk. We'll sit back and give you the stage.
Absolutely. Let me share my screen. Hopefully you guys can see that.
Yes.
Nice. Great stuff. Yeah, hi everyone. Just to reiterate again, my name's Chris. So I'll be covering everything kind of PPC, how to win in the war room here today. This is going to be very top level, probably about 20 minutes in length. So very much kind of scraping the surface. Anything you do want to know more about, more than happy for you to answer, kind of asking you questions at the end, or message me on LinkedIn afterwards, and I'm more happy to kind of go into a bit more detail. Just to quickly go after what we're doing, I'm going to be going to a lot of the tools that I use on a day-to-day basis, how to find the right keywords, and I know we're moving into a bit more of an AI keywordless space, so I'm going to touch a little bit on that. How to really work with teams across different functions, and how to get the best out of your developers, your creative guys, and making sure that your landing page is absolutely spot on. And finally, how to pull back without losing momentum. There's going to be periods of time over a year where you need to pull back, whether that's because of a budgetary constraint, maybe someone spent some money somewhere that they shouldn't have, and naturally budgets do ebb and flow, right? So I'm going to talk about a little bit how to pull back in the right areas, and maybe where you can actually afford to push a little bit as well. And I want to start off with that big myth again, just going back to the start of the big myth is that people with the big budgets win the most, and that's definitely not the case. There are huge nuances and benefits and wins to be had by simply spending a couple of £1,000s a month. I've clients ranging from probably spending £1,000 a month up to maybe £250,000 a month, and the ones spending £1,000 a month are definitely winning in the areas that they want to win in. They're finding the people that they want to be in front of. And some of them, it's B2B companies, it's lead gen companies, and the amount of people that are searching in these spaces aren't huge. So it's really powerful that they're able to find the right people at the right time without necessarily just blowing their CPCs out of the ocean. This whole kind of war analogy is probably built on the fact that every decision within the PPC space is super tactical. Everything is very time sensitive, and it really can turn the tide of an entire campaign. This whole war room analogy is basically built on the fact that it's so important to be talking to every single member of your team and other teams as often as you possibly can. I think back at my time of companies where I've worked in-house, and the amount of people that would have their own siloed teams, maybe a PPC team, an affiliate team, a finance team, a UX team. And it's really important, as you can see here, that everyone's around that same table, talking to each other with that same singular objective in mind. And ultimately, that's the way that you're going to get the best out of PPC. It isn't about someone just squirreling away and doing the best keyword research possible. It's about you collecting data off other team members, but also providing them with the data that they need to make super great decisions as a collective and effectively win the war, right? That's what we all want to do, is win against the big guys. And effectively, the best campaigns aren't actually won when you're actually doing the work. They're all based in planning. So a lot of what I want to talk about today is based on how you can win before you even set that campaign live. Where do you need to be looking? At what points do you need to be looking at them? And ultimately, when you press that go live button on Google, making sure that it's going to return a profit and not just put a load of money in Google's pockets. So the first place to start is by reverse engineering effectively what is the enemy doing. There are a ton of tools out there that you can see on this page where you can go in and understand what are competitors doing, where are they showing, how often are they showing. You can use ChatGPT to pull a load of data and then ask it to analyze things like trends, particular promos they're shouting out, or any kind of video assets. A great place that I like to start is the meta ads library, and that's because it's so rich. There's videos in there, there's images, and what's really useful is if you take a company like Nike, for example, they've probably spent millions of pounds on meta, millions of pounds on PPC. They've done so many tests and will know what's working and will push what they know is working. So for someone who's done absolutely zero PPC or very little, or if you're a company where you're not spending a great deal of money, these are great places to start to understand what's actually working for other guys without necessarily being able to go into their accounts. And you can learn so much because basically almost any ad you can see just by going onto the meta ads library. To build onto that, obviously you've got Google tools as well, the Ads Transparency Center. You can similarly see what kind of ads people are showing, what kind of promotions they're telling you, and also some of the imagery that they're using within the PMAX campaign that you can try and sort of use as well. And finally, Google Trends is always good. I like to look at Google Trends. In this example, we've got Nike sale. You can see over time how there's a bit of a decrease on that. But also there's an add-on you can use called Glimpse, which is free, I think, for some searches. And it gives you a bit of a AI-driven contextual element of what you're seeing in front of you. So it doesn't just tell you the data. It tells you why that data is behaving the way that it does. So, for example, I can see here that it spikes around Black Friday and Cyber Monday naturally. and that continues into the kind of gifting period around December as well. So it's always really good just to pick array as much data as you can, and that's going to arm you with as much information so you know what your competitors are doing, but more importantly, you know what they're not doing as well.
Hey Chris, quick question here, because there was a while where we were working on a tool that was comparing prices of advertisers, their competitors, and therefore we checked the shopping ads, the landing pages to see, all right, who else is out there selling a product, and then from that, some of our clients, our advertiser use Producthero, they started to learn who they're actually competing with, because in retail they usually have a great idea of who they're up against, but online obviously there can be way more other of these enemies that they don't know of. Do you have any tips or tricks in Google or anywhere else where you can get an idea of who you're competing with and who's the enemy?
Absolutely. The simplest place is probably within Auction Insights and Google Ads, a super easy place to go to. And you can kind of see if they're above a 10% impression share, you can see exactly their impression share or how many impressions divided by the number of searches that they're showing for. But equally, nothing beats a good old live Google search, right? I think there's a lot that you can be gained by sticking on a VPN, going to the country or the area where your competitor or your own ads are showing and see what that journey is like firsthand. There's nothing that really beats that.
All right. Thanks for that, man.
No worries. So in terms of some of the tools that I use as well, so there's a lot of SEO tools out there that can help generate some sort of paid view of the world. There's SEMrush, which I know is a bit more expensive. I personally use SERanky. I'm in no way affiliated with these guys, but that's just the one that I use. It's a little bit cheaper, and in my eyes, really, really good value for money. Within what I would do when I normally start to really uncover an account is go onto these tools, and you've normally got to take them with a massive pinch of salt. They're never going to be accurate, but what they will do is give you a bit of an indication of what's going on. So I can have a look at Nike's activity, for example, and understand what's the search volume behind the keywords that they're bidding on, what's the competition like, and what are the CPCs like. I can then also see what sort of ads they're running across what types of keywords or what different times of the year. So for example, in December, I can see here that they started running ads for men's trainers and Air Force Ones, but then they turned those off in January. So perhaps next year, is that a bit of an opportunity for us to bid on those keywords where we know the competitors pulled back? Or actually, was there a reason they're bidding on those in those times, and I can actually turn ads on in those periods? So tools like this are really good just to understand that landscape over time, particularly if your account is very seasonal and you're trying to understand the key wins or key areas in maybe a bit that's quite quiet. This is absolutely perfect to sort of uncover what your competitors are doing. To build onto that as well, you can then start to see what sort of ads people are showing for particular keywords. Again, are the ads relevant to the keyword themselves? Are they bidding on something completely different? Or in fact, could you do a better job of all of that? The best way to sort of visualize this is bundle this all together, bring it all together under one single campaign. So if you're asking your boss for £1,000 budget to make this work, you've already got all the data that you have to be able for them to make a well-informed decision. So for example, the data that I've just shown you there in terms of the best keywords, the best ads, where the ad's showing, use a tool like ChatGPT to bring that all together, to pull all of those things together and break those down into themes. So for example, here we've got a brand versus competitor campaign. We've got a performance campaign, an everyday trainers campaign, and we can start to see, right, where does the search volume, is it more favorable for us? Where are the key CPCs more favorable? What sort of intent is based around that keyword? And what's the ad strategy that we can identify for that? Again, these are all fueled by AI, but it takes a human person to really understand the true nitty-grittiness of that. So then we can say from a really informed decision here, everyday trainers, and I'm not sure how small this is for you guys, but that has 40,000 search volume in the UK versus performance at 22,000, and the CPCs are cheaper. So it's mid-intent, and we should definitely do that. So it kind of gives you a starting point of what you need to be doing, so that when you go and present those slides to the big boss or someone where you need that sign off, you're already armed with all of that data in front of you. Big point here is that the most valuable keywords aren't always the most expensive. You'll see a lot of the big guys go after those heavy hitting keywords. So Nike trainers, best trainers, really short keywords that are maybe 1, 2, or 3 words long. And a lot of the reason is searchers, at least at the start of the journey, are very lazy. They aren't going to tell Google, I want a size 6 red and green to play tennis at the weekends, all that kind of stuff. But at the start of the journey, they might have something really small. But then over time, that keyword string starts to become a lot bigger. And in fact, over 70% of the search volume around Google at the moment lies in those long tail keywords, which just shows you the value that they do provide.
We can heavily relate on this, by the way, Chris. We see it happening a lot also in Google Shopping ads, where people that make good use of title optimizations, for instance, which is a very important thing, adding more relevant keywords to their product titles, either using Producthero, Products AI, or any other feed management solution, is definitely helpful in gaining lots of extra impressions for your shopping ads.
100%. No, definitely agree. And with these kind of long tail ads as well, I won't necessarily wait for the answers in chat, but what's the commonality here? And the answer really is that everyone starts to ask things when the keyword length starts to become more than sort of 7 or 8 words. And yes, there's a huge caveat here that AI overviews are going to play a big part in this. And we all know that on the back of the I/O event by Google and Google Marketing Live, that it's really exciting that there's going to be ads coming to AI overviews. So this is a great place to start as well. What you can do in these certain tools like SE ranking, for example, is in filter by keyword or keyword length. So I've filtered here to all of the ones that are over kind of 6 or 7 words. And you'll see that search volume is significantly smaller, but actually a lot of these keywords competitors might not even be bothering to bid on or looking at with a fine tooth comb, because they're all super interested in the ones that are generating 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 searches a month. And these keywords are equally as kind of commercially intent based as some of the others. If someone's looking for a particular type of shoe or wants to know where to buy them, you could provide the answers right there and then. And in fact, some of the success that I've had recently over the last few years has been not just directing some of these queries straight to the service page or straight to the product page or category page, but in fact, sending them to a blog page, sending them to a page that gives them the information they need to then make an informed decision as to why you're the best person to sell them that product or service. And a good example as well, if it's lead gen based, or maybe if we're talking about mortgages or someone's asking quite a particular question about some financial product, is send them to a calculator page, to send them to a page where it's all about interactive content and stuff that's not just maybe 200 words, but something that gives them a bit more meaning, a bit more flavor, maybe a video or something like that. So there's so much you can do with these long tail keywords. It's all about how do we answer that question for that person, and how to tell them that the person to buy from is us. This is quite a cool thing. I literally only added this the other day because I saw it and I thought it was super cool. But for the little guys like us, the Google's just slashed the customer matched minimum sort of list. In the past, you had to hit 1,000 people in the customer match list to be able to use it. And now you only need 100 users, which is really good. So if you're a business where you maybe only have 100 people in your CRM list, if you upload those into Google for customer match, you can now start to get the full benefits of this. What it also means is that you can start to, if you are a slightly bigger business that maybe has 50,000, 100,000 people, you can start to maybe niche these down and bucket them into different sort of products or services that you offer. So again, tons of benefit with this, super excited about it, and definitely want to look at in your Google account soon.
Quick shout out to Anu Adegobla for posting this.
100%. Yeah, I would have missed it if it wasn't for her, to be fair.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to move on to creative as well. So as we all know, with PMax and demand gen and everything that's AI and keywordless and Google saying just give us your money and we'll make it work, I've found that creative is super, super important. And it's often very overlooked thing within PPC. People tend to look at keywords, they tend to look at ad copy and the actual words themselves, but actually the actual creative is normally left for the meta guys or the UX guys on site to have a look at. And there's so much learning that I think we can take from what's being done on the site, perhaps a video that our company's done recently, that we should be implementing into our own PPC designs. A great example of this is Unbounce. So that's a tool that I've used before. And what this tool does effectively, again, no affiliation here, but what it does is it can kind of give you a different landing page based on a number of characteristics. So for example, a characteristic of where you are located in the UK, for example, or what device you're looking on. In this example here, the famous one that they always give, it's different pizzas for maybe different people in the country. So for example, if you're in New York, you might see a picture of a pepperoni pizza. If you're in Texas, you might see a Hawaiian pizza. And I don't want to start any controversies by saying that's what those pizzas, that's what those guys like in those countries, but it kind of gives you an indication of what's possible and what you can change. So for example, you might want to say everyone who's coming on these keywords gets to see this pain point. everyone who's coming on these keywords, actually, I think they're a wealthy business owner, they're this or they're that. So I'm going to give them a different picture or a different message. Or maybe for this, I'm actually going to show them a video because I know that they're looking for something specific because they've asked for that on the search query. So by differentiating your landing pages and not always relying on that single one that everyone knows works really well, can sometimes play really good results. The key thing with all of this is make sure it's statistically significant. You will need a lot of traffic going through these pages to get any meaningful data. There's no point kind of sending through 10 clicks and going, this one got 5% conversion rate off these 10 clicks. It might have just been one lucky sale. So make sure that the numbers really speak for themselves, and make sure you're doing your due diligence to make sure that all the tests are kind of bulletproof, really. And test. As PPCs, we know it day in, day out. That's what keeps us here. That's what keeps us alive and going and motivated is to test. And I think any PPCer loves to test. These are some of the things that I love to test. And I think really kind of speak volumes as to where I've got some of the wins over the past few years, is to really, and again, this is overlooked, but make sure that what you're promising on your ad copy, a 20% sale, a free audit, whatever that is, make sure it aligns with what you're actually saying on the page. If someone's got a promo code, they jump on and they can't see where that promo code is, they're probably going to bounce. And in fact, there's tests that have been done to say that you can get a big boost in conversions by making sure that add to landing page message is consistent throughout. Sorry, Sam, go for it.
No, I don't want to interrupt you, but I had a quick question about this. So yeah, what I was wondering is do you have any tips on, for instance, how you can get your stakeholders on board to test, how you can convince them to do so, because they might have the assumption that testing would cost them extra, whilst obviously this talk is about how can you do it with less budget. How would this in fact help you give more worth of your money?
Yeah, it's a really good point, and we were talking about this before as well. It's really interesting that tests don't necessarily mean more money. They might just mean time, and I know time is money to some degree, but a test might be just someone like you pinching a developer's time to help you with a new landing page. It might be your own research into how a new campaign type might function. So actually, when you're going forward with these tests and trying to get approval for them, say we're still going to spend £1,000, but actually we're going to spend 50% of that in this new campaign type or this new ad variant or this new landing page. And actually, it's a lot easier to get the green light for that, because overall, you're not costing the business more money, but you might actually get better results and more revenue from that investment. That might mean you get sign off in the future for more investment.
All right, brilliant. Just a quick reminder here also to the audience, like I'm squeezing in some questions here and there. If you joined in a bit late, if you have any questions whilst Chris is doing his thing, just drop them in the chat. We'll cover them by the end. Right, so Chris, go ahead.
It's all good. It's all good. Yeah, and then finally to that as well, making sure you're looking at images and videos. I've seen some great videos work really, really well for explaining a pain point, particularly when you're offering something that isn't just a £2 thing or a £5 thing. If it's £1,000 item, someone's going to need some trust in you. Social proofing, maybe some client testimonials, maybe some recent work that you've done. I've got a video on my own website, for example, just to help people understand exactly what it is I can do, but also how I can help them. Making sure you're tackling those pain points head on. I hear from a lot of companies that they just kind of say, come to us because of this or that. We've got a big shiny product, but actually they're not talking about the reason why that person might be looking for that product or service in the first place. Is it a fact that their in-house teams are quite slow? Is there a certain tool or system that they're not using? Is there a way of working? Like whatever that might be, bring out those pain points. That's fundamentally why people will come to your companies, because they need something to fix that pain point. And try something as little as different colors. Different colors work surprisingly well for different parts of the site. Try putting your CTA button in green as opposed to red or blue, and move it around. Maybe make it sticky. There's so many things you can do. And if you're stuck as to where to start, literally go on to ChatGPT and say, where can I start? What can I change? And it'll give you some ideas to just run with if you're stuck. Equally, LinkedIn as well, great place to have a look at and sort of talk to people and find out new tests that you can try. It's always a bit of for me, I've found LinkedIn is a bit of an inspiration hub. If I'm ever stuck, I'll go onto there and I'll sort of go, right, yes, that's new. I'm going to go and test that. Moving on. And then the final bit I want to talk about was all about pulling back. And pulling back doesn't necessarily mean, pulling the plug and ripping down spend. Pulling back could mean something like pulling back in really poor performing areas and actually using that investment for something better. A great example of this, which I'm a big advocate that no one is using enough, is Bing. People are focused on Google. It holds probably about 94% of the market at the moment. And even with ChatGPT coming in and Perplexity and everything else, it's still holding firm at about 93, 94%. And people will often look at Bing and go, Bing's probably not worth it. It's probably not worth our time to manage, set up, UET tracking, consent mode, all the rest of it. And that's exactly why it is, because competition is lower, CPCs are lower, and actually there's a bit of research to show that there's a slightly older and more affluent audience on there. So it's 100% worth a go. I think you can port across all of your campaigns from Google within about 2 clicks once you've connected the two platforms together. And yes, you're not going to get the same reach as Google, absolutely not. But what it could do is just make sure that your money that you're spending is spent more efficiently. So worth a go for sure if you're not trying it already. Final couple of points were just around shopping as well. So this is a really interesting one that I've seen whenever I've worked on an e-commerce client, is 80% of a budget will be spent on 20% of products. So there's 80% of your products that are spending 20% of your budget. So it's probably pennies, if not pounds, that you're spending on all of these budgets and all of these sort of additional products. And, big shout out to Producthero actually, because I do actually use these guys to kind of pick out my heroes, work out what my sidekicks are, villains and zombies. And for anyone that doesn't know, just a quick whistle-stop tour, the heroes are the products where Google's going, yes, I've got the bidding history on these products. I'm going to continue to invest in these products. And the sidekicks are the ones where you go, yeah, the ROAS is great, but I've not got enough bidding decisions to really push these products. And that's why these are great items to look at, to test pushing those and sort of reduce the spend through villains. And villains are the ones where spending loads of money, the ROAS isn't great, they just need to be chopped. And that's quite a simple fix. The zombies is probably the most interesting one because a lot of products have a lot of zombies. They'll have 80% of their products that are literally probably spending a couple of pounds a day and they're not really doing too much. Whereas in fact, what I've seen is by breaking out these zombies into different campaigns and forcing Google to show for certain zombie products. Yes, there's been some failures in there, but actually there was a recent campaign that I looked at that was all about street furniture and cones. We found like a really obscurely sized orange cone that actually worked really well and had a really strong ROAS and probably spent pounds before. And we actually put it up to one of our top selling products because it actually worked out really well. So by all means, have a look at your product mix, particularly if you've got hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of products in the mix. Make sure the ones that Google are showing, the ones that you're pushing, are super, super relevant. And AI as well. So AI is the great equalizer. Everyone's using it. And I think at the moment, strategy is your only real edge. The way that I'm using AI, for anyone who's interested, is I use something called NAN or N8N.io. And that's been really good at just streamlining. As you can imagine, I'm a team of one. There's no one else in the business but me. So I need a bit of a system in place that means that I can supercharge what I'm doing and I can do 10 times as much as what I could do before. So there's certain workflows, as you can see here on the left, that I use. And again, we'll send the slides over afterwards, that just mean I can get data, make decisions on data, allow ChatGPT to help me make those decisions and bring a bit of context to it, and then develop new ideas or new pieces of ad copy. So for an example here, I might use the AI to crawl ad data, find out what my underperformers are in that ad data, help ChatGPT come up with some new ideas. I'll obviously validate those, and then I can use an API to update those ads straight away. I can then send a Slack notification, an email summary about all the changes that have been done, certain themes that worked well and didn't. So if you're ever looking to, send this to your boss or kind of find out what's working with my ads without necessarily going through every RSA ad, these are some great tools that are free to use. So NAN is completely free to use if you self-host these kind of API triggers. It's definitely worth a look at. And then this is it. This is my kind of PPC playbook, I guess, for the moment. So, just to recap, you should be looking at what your competitors are doing, looking at those keyword opportunities, supercharging your creative, making sure that creative and ad syncs up to the landing page, making sure you've got a strong feed, make sure the budget's trimmed in the right areas, and absolutely leverage AI. If I was to kind of then sort of translate into this, how you should personally be working day to day, there's probably a few takeaways. They are: make friends cross team, make friends with your developers, make friends with creative teams, share the knowledge, and they'll probably do something for you. Grow your network, connect with people on LinkedIn, find out what they're doing, see what they can do to help. Loads of people on LinkedIn, including myself, are always happy to have a chat about something like PPC that we're passionate in. And they'll probably tell you how to do something like without charging you anything. So just have a chat with someone. And then finally, build a system, find what works for you and just supercharge it. Do that again and again. I've said before to people that you're always going to have failures in PPC, and I don't actually think you're learning or growing until you have failures. Failures also mean lessons, right? So continue to grow, continue to evolve, continue to fail, but ultimately fail at speed, and then you'll find out what works well.
Amen. I love this, especially the last part. Like, this is also what this concept is for, this webinar we're having here right now, also with the people here in the audience, able to get these practical tips from you. Now, hopefully, some of you guys that are listening, you're looking at this and you think like, hey, there's some things that I already knew, or maybe some things that I didn't know, but I want to try out. And looking at this playbook that Chris has given away here, how long would it, for instance, take you, Chris, to go and implement all these steps? Give this a go, see the results, act on that. If there would be like a timetable for it, what would you say?
I think to do a proper job, you probably need to give yourself about a week on each. Talk to the people in different teams, really deep dive into what competitors are doing, and formulate a strategy. Once you've got all the data together, obviously they all feed into each other really, really nicely. But if you give yourself a week, that's enough time to really get into the bottom of A, what the business needs, but equally B, what you can provide as well.
All right. That's awesome. I'd definitely suggest to give some of these a go. All right. This slide is already telling you guys. Any questions? I've been keeping a close eye on the chat. I can see that there was actually a question from Peter about if their previous versions are recorded. Yes, they are, as Sasha already mentioned. Just let us know. You can also always reach out to hello@producthero.com if you want to see a particular one, and we can send the recording over. Another question from Sander. Even though he has left the webinar, for some others it might be interesting. He asked, any tools suitable for small teams? So he gave an example that SEMrush can be quite steep for low budgets. I think you did squeeze in some of those, but maybe again, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. I did catch that as well as we were going through. So the tool that I use is SE Ranking personally, and again, I think it's cheaper than SEMrush and Ahrefs. I think it's cheaper than as well. Again, some of them they're more expensive for a reason, right? They might provide you with more data, but equally, if the data that they're providing you with isn't useful, it's just a waste of money, right? So I'd encourage you to do a free trial with them all, and then understand which ones do I actually use on a day-to-day basis, particularly when you look at subscriptions. I'm sure you all might have a Netflix subscription, Amazon subscription, but you're not necessarily using them every day. So squeeze down and make sure that subscriptions that you are using work for you. So I'd encourage you just to give them all a go. But for me, I use SE Ranking. It's cheaper than the rest, and it provides me with a good enough data for what I need.
All right. Thank you for that. That's triggering some more questions. So I'm going to go straight to the next question from Ivan. Thank you, Ivan, for your question. You asked us, what do you think about standard shopping plus assets less performance max combo for ecom? Where are your more aggressive performance max or standard shopping?
It's a really good question. So at the moment, I think a lot of advertisers were pushed onto PMax and smart shopping or standard shopping. I think standard shopping still has a place. I still have within a lot of my accounts the standard shopping campaigns set up. But PMax, I think, will only get better in terms of the algorithm over time. So it's definitely one where you've got to, for me personally, I'm fully invested now into PMax, but I do have standard shopping campaigns on the side just to pick up perhaps some of the more efficient queries where PMax has run out of budget or it doesn't think it's the right fit, etc. But test and see what works for you.
Also, one thing that I'd like to add to that is what I always like. I know Chris gave the example of the labels, right? The psychic, heroes, zombies, and villains. We see that if you have a campaign where you want to isolate zombies and you let Performance Max do its work, it's usually pretty good in finding some new heroes and psychics more than standard shopping is. So especially for zombies, I'd recommend Performance Max. Even better would be if you'll dive into that zombie group and see if you can create some segments in there. Maybe there were some products that performed very well last year. Maybe they were out of season, but they're getting in season now. Maybe there are some products that are priced below benchmark, because all this data is also helpful for Performance Max. And if you give it if you give them the opportunity to do so, they seem to do pretty well. Then next question is from one of your Chris name buddies. Chris Horrich here is asking, do you find that when you've got multiple campaigns running, Google will assign a large percentage of sales to your own brand campaign.
Yes, it's a really good point. Google's always going to try and find the easiest way to get those conversions for you in whatever that way that is. And a lot of times it will kind of pick up on branded campaigns or try branded queries, etc. The best way to get true incrementality in my eyes is completely stripping out brand. If you can afford to, if no one's bidding on your own keywords, pause them. If they are, then separate them out into their own campaign and just make sure that brand exclusions are on PMax. Make sure they're negated out in your generic campaigns, and that way, when you do start to spend more money, you can actually see that return on investment a lot easier.
All right, thank you. On to the next one. Jeremy asked us, what are your experiences with Performance Max regarding business to business? I noticed even with signals and keyword teams, I still get a lot of business to consumer traffic.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I'm seeing exactly the same. When you look at kind of businesses I've worked with in the past, whether that's like drones, you've got commercial and domestic, or whether that's like aircon units, maybe again, someone's aircon in a house versus a hotel. It's really difficult for Google to understand the person behind that. Are they looking for 100,000 aircon units, or are they looking for one for their own house? Especially if they're visiting the same sorts of sites or the same sort of information. The bottom line for that is, the moment, that's not really possible to fundamentally differentiate. However, if you sort of compare this to Meta, if you can get your CPCs or impressions and CPMs cheap enough, it almost works out over the long term to get a few rubbish leads in, as long as the actual good leads are still coming in at a reasonable CPA. So for me, my mindset has always been, it's fine to get a few maybe B2C leads in, as long as we're also capturing B2B, because at the moment, there's no real way to capture B2B specifically through PMax unless you've got a whole sort of dedicated set of keywords on there as well.
All right, thank you. I hope that answers your question, Jeremy. Thankfully, you're not alone. As Chris said, he's experiencing the same thing. All right. Another thing about the zombies, which we were just discussing from Liuba, I'm trying to see if I can give a tip on that as well. Liuba said you mentioned zombies being challenging as to how to be addressed and tested, and it was mentioned to put them in a new campaign. Are there any other tricks you can recommend to wake any of those when we try to put them in a separate campaign? It's usually just underperforms and never really optimized. So I think for starters, sometimes products are zombies for a good reason. Why? If you try to sell a barbecue in December, it's likely that it's not going to work out the best, especially not in Europe. So that for starters, but then also from the products that you do have, try to see if we see that about 90%, sometimes even 95% of the products that somebody's selling in e-com are zombie products, right? So that's usually a big group of products. So if you'll just throw them into one campaign, even Performance Max will have a hard time trying to see which ones will work, especially if you don't give it enough time to go through it. So first thing you can do is start segmenting, and segment on the data that you might have to your might have access to. So if that's in-store data, if your product does very well in store, maybe you should give it an opportunity online as well. If it's a product variation on a variation that does perform pretty well, maybe you should give this one a go. Again, in what product is in season, or what product might be priced below benchmark. Those are all good products to give a go. I don't know if you can add anything to that, Chris.
Yeah, I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head, in that some products, it might just not be right to push them, but equally there might be some real gems in there. So if you want to just give them a push and you're adamant that you're selling them organically and they real have merit, then give Google a bit of leeway with the ROAS perhaps over a bit of time. Make sure those asset groups are all excellent and they're absolutely super relevant to the product in place, because I've seen a lot of catch-all campaigns, for example, where 90% of the assets don't even match the product that's in play. So make sure the assets, videos, images, the headlines are all super, super related to that barbecue, whatever it is that you're trying to sell. And it gives it the best chance then to perform it the way that you want it to.
All right. Okay, let's go on to the next question by Robin. Robin was asking, are you using different strategies on new versus returning customers within search and shopping, or about to, since Google is pushing on their insights?
Yes, again, really, really good question this from Robin. So for some clients, I am. For some clients, I don't necessarily think it's relevant, but for some clients, if it's perhaps a longer journey, there might be numerous touch points before we know they convert. Perhaps it's a big decision. Perhaps it's buying a new car, buying a new house. These things can take months, right? So for me, when I'm thinking about remarketing and focusing on people that are coming back through the journey, we might have addressed some of their ads in the pain point. But actually now it's about another ad, maybe a specific remarketing campaign. Maybe even we cross-sell and go onto Meta and tell them exactly why they should come to us. We know they're interested already because they've searched for our brand or our product or our service, but actually why us? And especially when you're looking at remarketing, that's the time when you can start to go with Trustpilot scores, customer reviews, testimonial, everything that kind of says, we know you want this product or service. This is why you should come through us. But it's a good point. Google are pushing a lot more insights through this. They kind of do a lot of the heavy lifting themselves at the moment with audiences and everything else that comes with that. But give it a go, really differentiate, and don't just show them the same ad the second time around, or else they'll be that ad fatigue. They've seen the ad before, so I'm not going to bother clicking, because they know it takes them to the same page. Give them something new to try.
All right. Hope that answers your question, Robin. Thank you again for that, Chris. The questions keep on coming, so if you keep on answering,
Indeed, it's great.
rolling.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, cool. So sorry if I might mispronounce your name, but the next question is from Ovidiu. I tried running a Performance Max for a local medical center, but it goes kind of broad and reaches people outside our area. Any suggestions to improve this?
The first thing which I've made a mistake on loads of times in the past 10 years is on the settings, making sure it's in, like, they're actually physically in those locations. Sometimes you've got it on like presence or interested. The other thing you could try doing is set up specific radius targets or postcode targets, as opposed to just maybe country targets, whatever that is, and just niche that down. Or put in negative targets as well. So basically negative every single postcode around your area, apart from the specific ones. And then give that a go, and that should work. If it doesn't, absolutely add me onto Google and saying, give me a refund for my money, because they're the tools that are put in place for a reason for us.
All right. Hope that answers your question, Ovidiu. Another one from Ivan here. He's checking if he'd understand correctly that you don't segment shopping and Performance Max campaigns by product categories, but rather by performance, aka heroes, villains, psychics, and so on.
So I do both. I'll have, let's say, let's pick a product like water bottles, heroes, water bottles, villains, for example. If there's not enough search volume, it doesn't warrant it, I'll probably just have it broken down by, let's just say, these are all my villains, because I don't want to necessarily have another 40 campaigns in there. But if it's a decent campaign, decent product category, I'll probably break them down by those 4 different ways for each different product category.
Great. For me to add to that, good that Chris added, like, it depends obviously who you're working with or you're dealing with. Don't over segment. We've seen results go drastically down if there's less than 30 products in a segment, in a particular campaign as well. If you are segmenting, good things to focus on is also not just categories, but might be margins. So you have different goals for products that you have high margins on and products that you have low margins on. So if you have those insights, you can also have, for instance, a high margin hero campaign and a low margin hero campaign, both for a different goal. All right, Jeremy, next one. If you target the long tail keywords, which you showed in your example, is it wise to target them as broad keywords or exact matches?
Good point. I would start with exact. Therefore, it gives you the ability to control what ad you show for the exact query and sending that traffic to the exact page. But experiment with broad, or even phrase, if it doesn't start to generate quite the traction that you want. Google is really good at taking your money really quickly. If you go straight onto broad, it's going to come up with loads of crazy things that maybe not quite relevant to the initial exact match. So exact match for me should be the ones where you can always understand the intent on that single keyword. It's never going to change. Given maybe there might be a bit of seasonality, but you're always going to know that, Nike trainers size 11, someone's looking for that quite intently, and they know exactly what they want. If you start putting broad match on there, it might start to go Adidas trainers size 11, or it might start to go green Adidas trainers, and loads of stuff like that. So I'd start off as niche and specific as you can. And if you're not getting the volume, slowly broaden that out, but make sure that you have some real guardrails in place.
All right, awesome. I'm very sorry for those who still had questions that we didn't get to, but we're going to close this session for now. You have the details of Chris here on the screen. For if you want to ask him some more questions, feel free to send him a message. And also, please reach out to hello@producthero.com or support@producthero.com. If you got any more questions for us, guys, we're also happy to answer. Chris, thank you very much for your time today and for the knowledge that you share with our audience. People out there, thank you very much for joining us once again. See you next time, and have a good day.
Cheers, everyone. See you soon.
Bye-bye.